The Zay Initiative, an ode to the past, a nod to the future, a collection of Arab dress and adornment, celebrating human narrative.
Friends of the Zay, creative advisors, and guests. How wonderful it is to have you all with us today. As the current situation around the world continues to prevent many of us from traveling, I'm absolutely delighted to be able to bring you a little slice of culture and welcome you to the second webinar in our 6th series on the art of Arab fashion. For those of you who don't know me by now, or it's your first time, I'm Emma Farmer, COO of the Zay Initiative. Some very quick housekeeping. We encourage you to use the chat function to tell us where you're from and how you're feeling today, but also to add your thoughts about the presentation as we move through. Please select audience and panelist so everyone can see. As ever, we will allow some time for Q&A following the session, so please do add your questions through the Zoom Q&A function. Thank you, Marjorie, for already starting the questions off this evening. All our sessions are indeed recorded and sent to registered participants within 24 hours of the event for viewing within the next 2 weeks. As we continue in this virtual world to bring together our community, following the inaugural behind-the-scenes session with Diana Louis a couple of weeks ago, we're delighted that this will now become a permanent fixture for all our friends of the Zay and creative advisors, directly following each webinar. This is an open mic session and a chance for you to ask questions rather than me. If you're not yet a friend but would like to join, please drop Catherine an email, events@thezay.org, and she will assist you. That's quite enough from me. Allow me to introduce you to the fabulous Dr. Reem El Mutwalli. Dr. Reem.
Thank you so much, Emma. And hello, everyone, and welcome to our session. To begin with, I would like to thank each and every one of you for your support of the Zay Initiative, without which we cannot exist. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope it will be as entertaining as it is informative. Now, I find it very hard to talk into the void right now, when I know so many people joining us will have had very difficult experiences through the pandemic. I'm also aware that we are speaking today under the present geopolitical situation in the area, and our hearts go out to all those directly affected and also to the many more who are touched by the conflict. For the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time, I usually start by explaining what Zay means, which is our name. Zay simply means the costume and general attire of certain country or era. And why do we use the Arabic term to explain, name ourselves? It is because we are concerned with the legacy of the Arab world. Now, simply put, we at the Zay Initiative collect the tangible to narrate the intangible. We collect artifacts to help record the stories of those who used or wore them. And this is particularly important in today's time when so much is changing and so quickly. And we find it our way to support the regional challenges that we face all around us today. Now, some of you might wonder, what do we mean when we say the Arab world? An Arab is a cultural trait rather than a racial one. Not all Arabs are Muslims, nor all Muslims are Arabs. The Arab world is full of rich and diverse communities, including Muslims, Christians, Jews, Yazidis, Kurds, Amazigh, Berber, and other minorities. Differences do exist, not only among countries, but within countries as well. And there are over 200 million Arabs worldwide. So generally, anyone who adopts the Arabic language is typically called an Arab. Today, after a long wait, almost a year, we are very excited that we have our special guest, where we will be exploring the invisible components of personal appearance, which is the scent. My guest is a close friend, a colleague, advisor to the Zay Initiative, and an avid supporter of our cause. She also is very generously and diligently the author of our monthly blog on jewelry. Sigrid van Roode, jewellery historian, archaeologist, author, as you can see from the books in front of you, of many of these books. And you might all know her if you are a follower of Instagram by the handle Bedouin Silver. Now, although scent has always played a major role in personal adornment in the Arab world, its ethereal quality leaves very few or no traces at all over time. Sigrid will introduce us into this lesser known aspect of personal adornment, and it will start with the historic background, exploring the uses of scent in personal appearance, as well as jewelry, hairstyle, and makeup, and also its role in religious, ritual, and social contexts. Now, Sigrid, welcome. And finally, we are together. And you look wonderful, I might say. I hope you're feeling good.
I am. Thank you so much, Dr. Reem. I'm feeling fantastic and so happy to be here.
It's so lovely. Now, you are a jewelry historian, and I'm sure many will be wondering, why would you be writing a book on frankincense?
That is such a good question. That is, well, you know, as I'm an archaeologist by background, and that makes us always wonder when we're looking at material culture, what are we missing? What is not there? So if I could have the next slide, we could see that. You see here this image of Sayyidah Salme, the princess from Zanzibar, and you see it's a sepia image, so we do not see all of her colors. We do see her fantastic jewelry, but what we do not see is how she would have smelled, because this woman would have been absolutely enveloped in like an aura of fragrance, and that is a capacity that we are losing if we collect only the jewelry or only the dress. And that got me to write about this particular aspect, because I work a lot with collections that have been collected in like the 60s, the 70s. And so every trace of scent is gone. And if you don't know that it exists, it's very hard to put it back into that context, so to speak. So that's how I came to write my book.
So true, so true. And do we know how old is the practice of fragrance and using perfumes?
Oh, it's very, very old. After all, we are humans. We find it already in ancient Egypt, where notably the perfume making was quite different than what we're used to now. So liquid perfumes did not exist yet. They wore a lot of floral colors, like you see on the left. That was from Tutankhamun, actually. He was buried with lots of flowers. There were scented oils, and everything was used in amazing capacities, amazing quantities. There's one story of a king in Mari in ancient Syria who ordered 1 liter of scented rose oil every single day. I mean, one wonders what he does with it, but that just goes to show how important fragrance always has been since, well, as early as we can trace it as archaeologists.
And I know that there are solid aromatics as well as liquid ones. And both of them have come to us through many archaeological sites. I doubt about the liquid, because the liquid would solidify with time maybe, but what are the differences between those?
Well, the liquid ones you would create by mixing flowers, for example, with an unguent or with an oil. So that would be more or less like you make garlic oil. You just let it soak and steep in there for a really long time. There has been some perfume that has been excavated from Tutankhamun's tomb. Well, actually it was the jar, and there was a little residue left in it, and chemical analysis have told us what the various components of this perfume were. So that makes it possible for us to reconstruct it. Now, the solid forms are more like the frankincense, the resins, and these also go back to a very, very long time. In fact, the frankincense was so prized and so much coveted in antiquity already that trade in the frankincense business was one of the factors in domesticating the camel, for example. And
how is that? Can we elaborate more?
Yes, absolutely. I can talk for hours, won't do that. But on the frankincense, you see this little cuboid-shaped frankincense burner, the lower part of the screen. These are typical for southern Arabia. So these were created on the south of the Arab Peninsula. And we find them archaeologically through an enormous area. So that means, that tells us that the trade in frankincense also reached all of these areas. So we're talking Palestine, Egypt, of course, more to the east, like Iraq also. That is where we find these cuboid incense burners. And the image above is the Egyptian queen Hatshepsut, who actually launched an expedition to a country that she called Punt, and that may have been in Eritrea or maybe it's Yemen, to actually get her frankincense. And the people that she sent out returned with actual frankincense trees that they had excavated, they had dug them out with their root system and everything, and that was planted in front of her own temple. So she would have these frankincense trees with her for all eternity.
Amazing. That's so fascinating. And what are the main the ingredients that we are talking about here?
Well, in antiquity, so that would have been frankincense and all sorts of flowers that were growing locally, although Tutankhamun had spikenard flowers in his perfume from the Himalayas. But when it really gets absolutely fascinating is in the Middle Ages. So after the Prophet Muhammad had conquered most of the Arab Peninsula, his generals then took over, and within like 100 years, the Arab Empire stretched all the way from Spain and the Maghreb in the west to nearly China in the east. And all of that territory made use of one language, of Arabic. So that suddenly meant that books from libraries in all sorts of languages were translated into Arabic and compared to each other and improved upon. And that led to a major scientific boom, which in turn led to distillation. And that is where we get our liquid perfumes from. So you have a lot of scientists, of chemists in the Arab Middle Ages that had not only the infrastructure to get ingredients all the way from Ibiza to China, but they could combine that, they could do experiments with it, and that is how liquid perfumes came into being.
And why was it so important? Why was all of this important? And what was the significance of fragrance?
Oh, there are so many values that we can attach to fragrance. If you look at the main ingredient that we use the most often, so the frankincense, that is the resin of the tree, as you see here. So it comes out in this gooey stuff, and then it solidifies in these wonderfully fragrant grains. That was used in ritual and in medicinal purposes as well, because we have to remember that all of the ingredients here were not only used in fragrance making, but also for medicine and even for cooking. And if we move on to the next slide, we will see another one. Here we see all of the ingredients, or well, a sample of them that would have been used. So we have the aromatic woods, like cedar wood, like oud. We have the resins, like the frankincense that we just talked about, mixed in with spices, with flowers that were distilled to form the attar. The rose water, of course, and the orange blossom water. And why it was used was your question. So if we move to the next slide, there we will see the values that generally are attached to scent. So it's either used in a spiritual capacity. because scent very much, it connects us to the spiritual world, to the unseen world.
Mhm.
Has a very strong social capacity. It's a very important part of social meetings, of gatherings. And of course, it has a very practical use. It actually smells nice. So it drives away odors, it cleans away the air. So these three things, these are the main values of why fragrance is so important.
So if we delve into the spiritual, can we elaborate a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. Well, in the spiritual field, scent works according to analogous magic, sympathetic magic. So something that looks like something is used in another capacity. A pleasant smell, a nice smell, that is equated with a good presence, a divine presence, something benign. And an unpleasant smell is associated with an evil presence. We see this in every culture in the world. Demons announce themselves with a very bad smell of sulfur or of rotting, of decay. And divine beings announce themselves with a wonderful fragrance. And also the smoke, the way it floats upwards, it dissipates, it disappears, and it carries your prayers with it into an invisible realm. And that is why it's important in the spiritual.
It's very fascinating to put words onto these, sort of different sensations of smell and vision, and to translate them into a narrative the way you are. It makes one think, and pause into how, automatically we do these things, but we really don't think about them. We use them and we practice them, but we don't stop and ponder how it affects us.
Exactly.
It's really amazing. And to come closer to the personal, how does it translate?
Well, if you take these spiritual meanings of scent and you materialize them into the personal adornment, you come in the field of personal hygiene, personal cleanliness. That in itself is an act of piety, being clean. Of course, you have the ritual washing before prayers,
Yes.
but we also learn from the hadith that the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, very much valued fragrances, valued being clean. So that is one way in which fragrance works for the personal, but it also protects us against jinn, because beings that want something from us that are not that trustworthy, they will stay away from fragrances. And this is what you see in this image. These are bottle stoppers, actually, of perfume bottles that have been set in silver to be worn as an amulet in Oman. And I'm wearing one right here, the blue one. And I have two here that I could show you, holding them up to the screen. This is an actual bottle stopper. So you would just take it out of your perfume bottle. You would put it behind your ears and on your wrists. And it hangs from a necklace. It's the association with fragrance, the way that it alludes to fragrance, that makes it such a powerful amulet.
The silver part is the part that goes into the bottle, or is it the glass part that goes into the bottle?
Here is the upper part of the stopper. So this is the part that you would hold. And then here is the stopper itself. This is what will be put inside the bottle itself. And that has been put in silver. So the silver would originally, of course, not be there. It's just a bottle stopper, and you wear it upside down.
Amazing. And I would assume that the material would be oily, so it will stick onto the silver, correct?
And it would also be glued in place with using a resin of sorts to really fix it in place, because oil dries up after some time and then it would slip out. And that is also what you see in informal ritual. So now we're really moving to the realm of magic and fragrance.
Yes, gems. So that's a very captivating word, actually. Everybody will turn and pay attention. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Because when you have an amulet, that is the material form of a remedy against anything that's ailing you, but there would always be an immaterial form in the form of fragrance as well. So you have an amulet, and to operationalize, sorry, very difficult word, this, you would, for example, have to move it through smoke. I once had an amulet made in Marrakesh for a friend of mine, and the ritual practitioner wrote down a verse for me and folded that over and put it into an amulet container. And then he handed me a shopping list for an incense mixture that I had to buy and burn to activate the amulet. So it's very closely intertwined. And well, you know, of course, how you burn bahur, how you burn incense in your home to dispel evil or to bless it. It's something you see all over North Africa and Southwest Asia.
We also found many amulets that generally, you know, there's an amulet that's called a tabla in the general Gulf region, and it's a square shaped, and usually it would contain a few pages from the Quran or few prayers or some kind, and they put it inside it. But some of them, when we opened them up, we found sort of petrified incense, something that was most probably made into a paste and then placed inside this. Is there a difference? I mean, is it as part of a sort of a ritual that they are going to be inserting this, or would it be something that they substituted at a later time in place of a prayer leaves or something of the sort? What do you think?
Both actually happen. You have original amulets that are also filled with a fragrance mixture. So that could be an incense. It can be a mixture of herbs and plants that a ritual specialist prescribes, like a doctor does. But what you also see is that old amulet holders are reused to insert perfume materials in. So both is true, really. But either way, it goes to show how important fragrance is to carry close to you.
That's very, very true. Which takes us into another realm, and that is the social.
Absolutely, that is one of the other values of fragrance, and especially in North Africa and Southwest Asia, this is incredibly, incredibly important. So when you receive a person in your home, you will make sure that the home is fragrant, it's smelling pleasantly, you prepare for your guests. And when they leave, this is also sometimes misunderstood by Western visitors. When they leave, the guests, they are also very elaborately perfumed. So after the visit, the hostess will bring out this little box with oils, and she will pass one by one to the guests in the order of the guest of honor sitting next to her and then passing them on. And then she will pass on the incense burner. And you see that happening here, where you incense your clothing under your armpits, under your veil, and then you will take your leave and depart. It's also a time marker, and it expresses respect. It expresses hospitality towards your guests. But after this fragrance ritual, it is actually, you have to go.
Yeah.
Not
yes,
every
we have an Arabic saying that says, بعد العود ما في قعود. يعني
exactly.
Nobody stays still. They have to leave or take their leave once oud is presented. But also, you are very right. In the Gulf region mainly, they still practice this, and usually people are scented before they leave their home to go to an event. And in the event, they are received with a scent, so that you have a different scent coming in as you enter to welcome you. And then, as you explained, another one comes out just before everyone leaves. And what they say is they could recognize where you have come from. So when you go to another place, based on the type of smell when you walk in, there's this sort of huff of air that passes by and people can smell your presence, then they would know where you came from. They could tell at times which home you came from based on the distinct smells that are used by each home.
But isn't that a wonderful way of welcoming a guest, by enveloping the guest in your own fragrance. It's such a basic instinct of welcoming that I find that very beautiful.
Yes.
And it's
sure.
these these meanings that we are forgetting, especially when it comes to like we see here, the body aesthetic. Because fragrance itself is an agent. Fragrance does something. It's not something that is, just spritz on just to smell nice. It's not just beautification. It's not just an aesthetic expression. It is really, really very meaningful in rites of transition. So applying henna with a scent in it, we'll come to talk about that in a bit as well, but that is so incredibly important to understand that it's so much more than just a nice smell. It's an active agent in a transformation, right?
Yes, that's very, very, very true. I agree.
Yeah, like
yes, sorry, go ahead.
Well, like the most important transformation, of course, or the largest, let's say, is a wedding, when you transition from being an unmarried person to being a married person. And that is an entire transformation. And it's operationalized, sorry, again, difficult word, by means of fragrance also. So you will have the bride going to the bathhouse before the wedding. Well, that's also, I should not say before the wedding, that is the wedding. That is the transformation that you're going through. So you're going to a bathhouse to be cleaned, to be made pure for the next step, which will also involve a very elaborate henna decoration, which is not decoration, but it's an active form that is transforming you into your next life stage. And that is also why you have this incense around. So it's not beautification of the bride, it is transforming a person into the next stage of life. And also it's very, very important, we just talked about magic, to keep jinn at a distance at a wedding, because well, they are very much attracted to beings that are in between stages, so they can attack a bride. And of course there is the practical, we would almost forget, but in our world today, so I have the impression that we tend to forget how incredibly smelly the world can be, like the tanneries in Fez that we saw on the next slide. If you've ever been there, the odor is unbearable, especially when it's really very hot. And that would have been everywhere, there would have been the butcher shops, there would have been the fish market. It would have been a very smelly place. So you actually need a very strong fragrance to counteract all that.
In a way, we've been really sanitized from all these smells nowadays with this lifestyle that we all lead, most of us lead. We hardly smell anything. People could recognize whether food was fresh or not, and whether meat or fish, and they could tell us so much about so many things just by smelling it. And today you really have to smell hard to be able to get a fragrance out of anything.
Absolutely, I agree.
And taking it from there into the practical sense, maybe we could give some background to that.
Yes, absolutely. Here again, in antiquity, we find incense burners in, for example, granaries. And that was not to fragrance the grain, that was to keep vermin out. Because it also works against, all sorts of these little rodents and animals, moths and mosquitoes. So fragrancing your clothing, everyone who has once had a moth attack will agree. That helps to get them out in a natural way. So, and even if you keep in mind that, again, these vermins, so rats and moths and mosquitoes, are also, again, a manifestation of evil, because jinn will manifest as these beings, you also keep evil at a distance. So that's how it works in a practical sense.
So yes, that's very, very true. And it takes us into the discussion on jewelry, body aesthetics, and dress. and how they interact or interweave with smell and with perfume.
Yes, because now that we have covered the basics of why smell matters, why fragrance matters, we can much better understand what we're looking at if we're looking at jewelry, body aesthetic, and dress, which are, of course, three components of personal appearance. So separating them, as I have here in these little boxes, is actually impossible in reality. But you have jewelry items that are designed to hold fragrance, or that are even made of fragrant components itself. You have fragrance as a layer in body aesthetic and in your hairstyles. And all of that comes together also in your dress, which you will fragrance and perfume as well. So these are the three ways in which we can see scent being active in personal adornment.
Mm. Yes, and again, here in the Gulf region, we still see it very actively practiced. Even when when people send presents away. So we lost this tradition in many of the other Arab countries, but in the Gulf region, even when they are going to be sending a present to somebody, the present is fumigated at first, no matter what it is, and scented, sprayed with perfume, and then packaged and in a beautiful way before it is sent out. So when you open it, you're not only experiencing the receiving of that present and the present itself, but a whiff of wonderful smell comes out as you open it and as you try it on and put it on, no matter what it is. So it's a wonderful gesture that continues to be practiced in this area, which brings wonderful, wonderful piece.
What a fantastic custom. I'm going to do that.
We do that here, yes. You have it also when guests arrive or on a daily ritual at home, prayer mats and prayer veils. They are daily perfumed with incense as well as perfumery. And also when guests are coming, the same ritual is repeated, and then they are packed neatly and presented. So again, when you open it up to start your prayer, the whole scent comes, whiffing out. So it gives you the sense of happiness as well as maybe focus. You could focus more. It grabs your attention. And as you put your head down when you are praying, onto the floor, as you touch the floor, you continue to inhale all these aromas as you are praying, which is a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful.
This one is a lovely piece, which I thought we would talk about because I think it has long been lost from many of the eastern region of the Arab world. I have not come across many of those, but I think it's the practice that continues in North Africa, in areas such as Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and I think they continue to do so, and it's wonderful. So maybe you can take us through this.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You're quite right. These are used in the Maghreb, and these are jewelry items that have been made of scented paste. So the little brown things that you see on both of these necklaces, these are solidified beads made of a very, very fragrant paste. And these would have been created at home by the women of the family, which is it's a very laborious undertaking. So it really takes time to create these. But every family would have its own recipe, its own fragrance, which would be passed down through the generations. And it would also be a moment when you have all of these women creating these beads.
It's more a cultural gathering sort of thing, yes, where women gather around and make it together.
And also instruct the younger generation about, shall we say, the birds and the bees. It's a wonderful female-only opportunity to talk about everything while creating these beads. And they were only worn, that also is interesting, by married women. So not by unmarried girls. If we move to the next slide, I have another image of them there. Here you see a wonderful, wonderful ornament that was worn in Tunisia. And the photograph also is a Tunisian woman. If you look closely, you can see she's wearing a very big necklace with silver amulets, and in between are these large beads of scented paste. And this would be something that you would wear as a married woman, because using fragrance in general, using perfumes, is something that you would start doing from your wedding onwards. So unmarried girls would not use perfumes all that much, because it's very much associated, with sensuality, with being a woman in every aspect imaginable. And there's even a proverb from Algeria that says, if you're not wearing these beads, you're not a real woman. So that tells you about the status that these beads had.
It's true, and they shape them in different shapes. They have molds that they create, so it could have a triangular shape as these are, and some of them have like a fish shape, which is again another omen of good luck and prosperity, and they have flower shapes and so on and so forth. And it is called a schab, aqd al-schab they call it, which is a very interesting name. We are researching to find out where it came from and what is the origin of the root, or the root of the word. But it is very well known as aqd al-schab in Northern Africa region. And this is another style of jewelry. Does this have a scent?
It does, because these scented pastes that were used to create beads, similar scented pastes would be used for your hair, also in the Maghreb. So you would form these absolutely fantastic hairdos. Every Amazigh tribe in Morocco, for example, would have a signature hairstyle, and that would be modeled into place using this paste. And so inevitably, of course, it would end up in the jewelry that you would be wearing in your hair. And this is, again, where you encounter scent. If you don't know what it is, you might mistake it for dirt, because you see it here on the right side of the screen on the upper bead, the upper coral-colored glass bead. It has this little patch of a black sticky stuff. That is actually the remainder of a scented paste that would have been worn in an occasion of a wedding or another festival. So it's the only physical remnant of a joyous occasion, of a transition, of something beautiful. And if we do not recognize it, it's often mistaken for dirt.
That's very true. Very, very true. Actually, we had such an incident. I was working on some archaeological pieces at the museum here in Dubai, and we came across one of these necklaces which had the remnants of this paste, and the ladies thought that was dirt, and we needed to clean it, and I quickly stopped them, because I really didn't want to lose those little specks in order for us to understand what they are and what is the substance that's in them. And they very much mistook it for dirt, and they were going, why would it be so dirty? Is it that old? And I had to explain that no, this is probably the remnants of these scented pastes. And to speak about the hair, here again in the UAE, they have the same tradition, and women generally used to create something called libda'a, which is a combination of oils and herbs and perfumes. They would knead it together, and they use it almost like as thick as a henna paste, and use it on their hair, and they would braid their hair in a specific way called shungji. And it's almost like a crescent around their head. Okay. And this would help the hair, it would condition it because it has oils in it. It would protect it, and at the same time it will scent it. You know, as in the hot climate, you are constantly sweating earlier on. Today we have air conditioning, but whenever you sweat, the sweat mixes with this perfume, and it sort of exudes out of you. So you end up being smelling good as time goes. You know, it continues, it stays, it lingers, and it helps you stay fresh throughout the day and throughout the week. until it's time to have some water in order to bathe. So it was a way of conditioning and keeping their hair and their body clean for a longer period. And again, we witnessed this in the UAE not a long time ago, but it used to be also the practice.
Fantastic.
And we come to this one, which is another form. I know that they used clove. This is the clove one, right?
Yes, this is one with cloves. The one in the center in color is from Palestine, and these will be worn on weddings. So it's a really beautiful tradition. Cloves are, of course, very difficult to pierce, so you would have to soak them in water first until they're soft enough to pierce. And then the bride would, in her bath, also use this clove water. So imagine this wonderful fragrance. And it was also a token of respect from the father of the bride to her female relatives and her female friends, as a means of telling them that he really much valued their bond as friends and hoped that this would continue after the wedding. So these were often paid for by the bride's father, for example. And if you look at the lady from Morocco who is on the left, see how many of these she's wearing, and can you imagine the fragrance that must have come out of her? And here is a little example of the glove one, so you can see how the gloves are strung one by one on this wonderful necklace, and it smells just absolutely fantastic. It still does.
I wonder how long does the smell last in these?
Well, I wonder too, because I found this one in Amman over 10 years ago. It still has a gorgeous fragrance. So it's the scented paste beads. They lose their fragrance little by little over time as they get older. The ones from the Maghreb, but if you warm them between your hands again, they will start to exude again. It's magical.
And some also dip them in some fresh oil that is scented, so it grabs more of the same, just to renew them or refresh them in time.
There's this ornament, for example. This is from Morocco, and you see how in these openings there's wool, and this wool would be perfumed again. So you would be wearing this in your hair. It would just sway and fragrance over and over again. And when it had dissipated, you would just add a little oil again. It's a piece of jewelry to actually hold fragrance.
How beautiful! How beautiful! How lovely! And then let's talk about maybe a little bit on the other ingredients that the as we see in the image here. Maybe you can talk us through it.
Yes, because this is where fragrance meets body aesthetic. And I'm going to show you 3 steps in which we add a layer of meaning. So first we will start with the color and the substance of these body aesthetic materials. The henna, for example, this is a material, a substance that has blessing in itself. So henna is regarded to have barakah, to have blessings. And using henna either in your hair or to dye a cloth or as a body aesthetic, that will bring that barakah, that blessing to the wearer. So it actively blesses. That is also because of its color. It's slightly greenish when it's powdered. And that same goes, for example, for other materials, substances that are yellow, that are worked into a yellowish paste, which is called dihan on the Arab Peninsula. And that is worn on the face, on the body also. It works as a sunscreen, but it's also very much used in a gesture of blessing, because the color and the substance both bring blessing to the one who wears it. So you see here an image of a woman applying this to the bride's hands in Oman. And you see it worn on the face, also in Oman, behind this beautiful indigo dyed mask. Her chin looks a little bit yellow, and it is because this is where this paste has been applied. So that is the basis of fragrance and body aesthetic. And if we move it one step further, so beyond the color and the substance, and we add the fragrance, we add another layer of blessing. We have just seen that using fragrance in the spiritual connotation also blesses and it protects. And if you combine those forces with the powers of the henna itself and its color, you will have a triple layer of meaning. So you have here the rose water, for example, being sprinkled in the henna paste in the hands again of an Omani bride, which only adds to its magical capacities. And that's not all, because then as the final one, we add the patterns, which are in...
But before we go to that, but I want to just make a small comment. You know, the rose water, we use it so often in our rituals today, but seldom do people understand why it's done. And actually, the younger generation always mocks the fact that why do I have to walk in and they are going to spray rose water on my hand? What's the point? So, you know, so many of these beautiful connotations have lost through time. They are all gone and have been lost, and we don't really understand. We practice, but we don't understand why. And here it's so wonderful that you are illustrating how, you know, the roots, the basic roots of these customs.
Well, that is exactly the thing, Dr. Reem. We are doing it so we have the form, but not the meaning. And if we do not understand why we are doing things, we will not recognize them in just an object alone. So like take the henna patterns, for example, that we see here. You can have your henna done everywhere as a tourist in the entire region. But the meaning of these patterns as the final layer upon the color, upon the substance, upon the fragrance, and then you inscribe patterns with them that have been passed down through your family also, because these are originally very, very specific for a family, for a tribe, for a region, for a village. They are a form of oral history also, because when you are applying the henna, you will hear this story. This is the pattern of, and then this story will be relayed. And it also protects. It's a visual language. It's a sensory language in its patterns and in its smell and in its appearance. That sometimes is just being reduced to a tourist attraction. So that's also why I wanted to write this book, because these aspects of meaning are really very hard to grasp if you're not familiar with this world. It's really a way of connecting generations, well, through something invisible like fragrance.
Very true. That's very true. Which leads us to fabrics, to you know, to our medium.
That is the way that fabrics are fragranced, especially in the eastern part of the Arab world, so on the Arab Peninsula. That is just wow. I've seen that in action only once with the way that you have this large funnel-like object. This is a small one that I've depicted here. But the way that the incense is burned in it, and all of your clothing are wrapped around it, and then another time again, so when then the outer layer goes inside the rack and vice versa. So it is absolutely drenched in this wonderful, wonderful scent. That is really an art that is very hard to understand if you don't know why you're doing this, because of all the reasons of the personal cleanliness, the respect towards others, keeping moth out, of course. And I just love that. And I wanted to ask you, in the Zee collection, do you have fabrics that still have their scent?
I always tell the story of the young lady who donated from the UAE, who asked me who was very happy to donate her grandmother's tunic dress, which is called kandora in this area of the world. And she had one request or one condition for us to have that dress. Her grandmother had passed away in 95 or 93, something of that sort. And this was the one article of clothing that was left within this young lady's possession. And together with it, there was a small vial that had the remnants of the atar, the perfume that the grandmother used to wear. And this young lady insisted. She said, I will give you the dress, but only under one condition, and that is you would keep this perfume with this vial, with the dress all the time, so that it will continue the scent of my grandmother with the article of clothing, and it will keep together. So scents and perfumes are very, very important to people in this area of the world. And to add to what you were just showing, I myself, when I travel, I mean, of course, I use the bukhur and the incense because I love the custom. But before I travel, I get my clothes incensed in this format, and then they pack it into my suitcase. And for the period of 2 weeks or when I am away, everything that comes off my suitcase smells so beautiful that my hotel room smells the same, my cupboard smells the same. And when I go out, all my clothing is scented. So you are wearing layers, not only, I'm sure you know, and I'm sure many of those who are listening to us know, but to put perfume, it's a combination of many layers. So you have the oils, you have the fumes, and you have the spirited ones, which is the European or more international style of perfumery. And the art of putting the scents on is by knowing what to layer and how, which ones to mix together and how to put them together in order to come to a final note that is recognizable as you. Because I think also, to take it further, scents are a form of, almost like a thumbnail. You can recognize people out of the scent. If you walk into an elevator, sometimes you recognize who the person who was there just because of the scent, who had come there before you. So it's wonderful the way it affects us. And this is a wonderful example. Maybe you can take us through it.
This is how dress and a person are so closely interwoven. This is a henna cloth from Morocco, which is also perfumed, and it's decorated with henna. That is the patterns that you see. So here you see it's treated in much the same way that you would treat a person. So it's really, there is no boundary between the person and the clothing that they're wearing, and that is why I love this object. It's looking like just an object, but it would have smelled and it would have been so closely connected to the person that you could actually say that this is part of the person wearing it. It's very much defining personhood. This is a piece of fabric with its own identity. It's not just anything, and that is why I chose to include this one also. It's beautiful.
Scent in sayings and expressions. We can talk so much about this. Yes, go ahead.
It's also because scent is so omnipresent in these societies, in these cultures. You will also find it in sayings and expressions, because these will tell us, these will use metaphors that we are all familiar with. So in this case, scent. I love this one that says incensing in open air, which really means, what are you doing? This is completely useless. It's wasting something expensive, something good that will just dissipate into open air. So that's a wonderful saying.
We also have another one which I always like to use, and that is they say لجل طيبة يحرقونه, which means in order to get the perfume, you burn it. So it is ironic that you burn something, you destroy it in order to get the beauty of it, to get the wonderful aroma out of it. Yes. You destroy it. And we use that as an expression even on humans who give so much of their time or effort. Those who are very, giving, they tend to be that type of people, sort of thing, They sort of burn themselves in order for others. So it's another expression that is used.
It's like a fragrant burnout.
Yes.
Well, this is the one you already mentioned, the time marker in the hospitality.
Yes. There's no coffee after oud. Yeah, they say قعود means to sit down, and they rhyme. So oud and قعود go together. That's why they use that term. And which takes us almost to the end. We're coming to the end of our discussion, and we already exceeded the time limit. But I'm enjoying this so much. I really don't want it to end, and I've been waiting for it for a whole year. So I was wondering whether, to conclude, maybe you can explain to us why fragrance is such an important aspect that we need to study. I know we touched upon it, but maybe we can briefly go through.
Yes, absolutely. So just really briefly, we touched upon this already, that when you mentioned the rose water sprinkling, why do we do it? What we now see is a separation of the form and the meaning. So you perform certain acts without the meaning behind it, without sometimes even the knowledge of the meaning behind it. Like we just talked about with the henna decorations for tourists, the selling of these wonderful perfume bottles also for the tourist industry. So what I think really important is, and that's also what you're doing with the Zee, of course, is preserving not just the objects, but the knowledge that goes with it. Yes. Like Sigrid also said in an earlier talk, document, write it down, all the stories that are still existing today, because our grandmothers are still alive and they can tell us all of these stories, how they used it, why they used it, when they used it. That will all be gone in maybe 2 more generations. No one will remember. So to have this entire cultural background with the collection that you're the custodian of, either as a museum curator or as an initiative such as your own, it's very important to remember the invisible aspects, because these reflect culture also. I often say it's sort of my tagline, which probably the audience has heard like 1,000 times: jewelry does not exist in a vacuum. We always have to look at its surroundings. So the dress, the adornment, the fragrance, the stories, the meaning. Well, basically what you're doing with the Zee initiative.
Actually, you reminded me also of the work of one of our advisors. We spoke also about it. She was our guest, Patricia Mills, who created artwork based on this. And she used these traditional elements into the artwork. And huge installations that oozed out with all this beautiful scents and smells. And in a way, each smell was telling a story. So it's just as we tell a story in the way we dress, for example, or in the jewelry that we wear, we are also saying something about ourselves or our heritage or our background or our history through the scent that we are using, and even through the sense that we are attracted to as individuals. Yes. Maybe we should end at this note, although I am not really, I would love to continue for much longer, but as Emma is out again with us.
Wow, 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 wow. So I learned so much, and I thought, I knew a little bit, but anyway, just absolutely fascinating. First off question, straight away, Sigrid. How are the clothes soaked? In cold water or another way?
It is my understanding, but Dr. Reem, please help me if I'm wrong, that they are sort of more like sprinkled with scented water and fumigated. But I suppose they could also be soaked in water, but how would you do that?
Really soaked. I don't think, no, I've not seen anything that's been soaked. Maybe they would soak the beads that we looked at, adding some oil to them in order to refresh the scent in them. But in fabrics, generally it is the smoking or the infusing it with smoke, and then maybe spraying or sprinkling some oils onto them, very gently. Diluted oils, not very heavy ones. The heavy oils are rubbed on the body, and especially on specific points, like your wrist or here or here. The hair, generally hair is very much you take a little bit of oil and you rub it into your scalp, and that stays on forever. And when you take a shower, the moment water hits it, the whole place is infused with whatever scent you are using.
Sigrid, as an archaeologist, don't you find it really frustrating that this whole narrative of scent gets lost over time?
Absolutely, really. It's as an archaeologist, when I find things, I don't work on an excavation, I can't help but wonder, what am I missing? How would this have smelled? What would it have looked like? What would it have sounded like? And it's totally frustrating indeed that this capacity will disappear over time. On the other hand, that is inherent to this capacity. So the only thing we can do is make note of it, that it exists, so that we can pass on this information to future generations. Because, well, much in the same way, I have been here the last hour talking to you about fragrance without being able to have you actually smell it. So in a way, we can still hand down that kind of information. But yes, it's frustrating.
I guess we need to come up with sort of scent in a bottle or something similar, Sigrid.
Yes. There are recipes that were handed down. I know of the recipes that were written by Harun al-Rashid's wife. She was very well known for her skills. Not everybody can mix the scents or the perfumes. I hesitate when I say perfume, because usually in our area of the world, it is the oil rather than the perfumed or the alcoholic one. There were specific people throughout time who have been known for their acute sense of knowing how to mix these. And I know that Harun Rashid, the Abbasid Khalifa that was in Baghdad, his wife was very well known, and her manuscript is one of the oldest manuscripts we have in the area that has written recipes about mixing these oils and creating certain scents. Usually people who mix them do not, it's a secret that they keep with them, and they don't like to divulge to anybody. But in today's time, I know that Her Highness Sheikha Fatima bint Mubarak, the wife of the late Sheikh Zayed, founder of the United Arab Emirates, is very much well known for her nose and capability in mixing these tones. And you are lucky if you visit and she decides to give you one vial to keep as a gift from her. So it is also a ritual in that format.
Wonderful. I love this question from Romana, and so topical today as well, as everyone's talking about sort of cultural plagiarism and how cultures, what traditions are passed from one to another. So this question, my family is from India and my grandmother infused her hair with scent using smoke fumigation. Did this practice come from India to the Arab world or the other way around?
I think it has a shared heritage in the Middle Ages. So that was when the Arab Caliphate stretched all the way to China, including parts of northern India. And there always has been a very, very intense trade contact between India and the Arab world. So it could very well be something that you discover together, elaborate upon and exchange together. I would not be able to pinpoint one exact location.
Also depends on the scent. We know oud is the best one, is the Indian one, and there isn't much left of it. So it's very, very rare and hard to come by. Now they go to Cambodia, they go to Vietnam, they go to these areas to find the oud. But for example, the mur, the misk is Yemeni, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Yemen was very famous for it. It depends. For example, you have Taif area of in Saudi Arabia today. It's well known for the rose. Morocco is very well known for its roses. So it depends. each area has a specific scent that is well known for it.
Wonderful. Romana's just popped in. She used oud, so her grandmother.
Indian generally, it's
Yeah.
very much from India, yes.
Because that's also an interesting thing to bear in mind, that the scents that we associate with the Arab world today, like oud, like musk, were unknown there before the Arab conquests of the Middle Ages. Because, well, oud comes from Asia, and musk originally also came from Central Asia. So it was only when the world opened up in the 9th to the 11th centuries, especially, that we see these ingredients making their way to the Arab world to be very, very much coveted. Also, of course, because the Prophet himself loved musk.
Wonderful.
And you just mentioned today that you read something about what they found in Yemen.
Oh, yes, indeed. Thanks, Dr. Reem, putting me on the spot here. So Sigrid, you may need to help me here. So I was obviously researching ambergris and looking about everything we were talking about today. And I came across this incredible article that's literally happened in the last sort of couple of weeks, but Sigrid, again, correct me if I'm wrong. But in a sperm whale, there was $1.1 million worth of ambergris found by some Yemeni fishermen who have now bought... you know, it's turned their lives around. There we go. So it's wonderful.
Absolutely. The ambergris is so insanely expensive, original ambergris, because it is produced in the bowels of the sperm whale, as you say, and well, its delivery, shall we say, is rather unpredictable. We don't know when a sperm whale decides to produce it. So when you find it, it's so costly. We had a little lump that was found in the Netherlands, of all places. And that also fetched like 60,000 euros. It's insanely expensive. So that's a very good catch for the fishermen.
A very good catch. Well, on that note, it's been absolutely fabulous to have you here. I can see lots of questions coming in about Sigrid's book and also about further book recommendations about scent and layering. Sigrid, I think maybe we should put a blog post together about scent and layering, and also some questions about the manuscript from Baghdad, Dr. Reem. So again, let me come back to you all tomorrow with that link. Anyway, from now, please all come back on the 15th of June. We have the wonderful Sheila Desai with us, who will be discussing tie-dyed head coverings of Kutch, identity, utility, and interreligious relations. Meanwhile, any of our friends as creative advisors, please do join us for behind the scenes on the other channels. Thank you so much, and wonderful to be with you all. And Sigrid, I could not be happier to have you here with us today. Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.